Hello, welcome back. Sorry for the long delay between videos. Two reasons for that. One, I've been very, very busy in real life. And two, this film is by the very prolific Italian director Ricardo Freida. This film, let's see, in Italian it would be L'Iguana dalla lingua di fuoco, which means the iguana with the tongue of fire. As you can probably tell, this is a giallo, and it is influenced by Dario Argento's Bird with the Crystal Plumage. We can tell that by the title. It's an animal giallo, as some people call them, and like many other animal gialli, it has very little to do with the title. In fact, I'll just tell you right now, because sometimes I get into these and I forget to tell you what the title is even referencing. And this title is referencing the fact that a police chief who is trying to find the killer compares the killer to an iguana because he said that one time he was in Brazil and he stepped on an iguana because he couldn't see the iguana. So basically the iguana was hiding right there in front of him and he couldn't see it. And they know that the killer is hiding somewhere amongst them, but they can't find him. Although he does say that the iguana is horrible, looks horrible, but is harmless, whereas this guy probably looks normal, but is very harmful. So they just mentioned that iguana. That's as long as they mention. I just gave you the whole thing. So they talk about an iguana for about 45 seconds, which is on par with most of these other animals gialli. So anyway, before we talk any more about what this killer is doing, you can take a look at this crazy poster. We've got someone getting their throat slit with a razor, and of course the classic black glove that most gialli have. So anyway, here's Ricardo Freida. This is Ricardo Freida directing a movie in the late 50s. Now, most of our Italian directors, like, for example, Dario Argento's first film was in 1970. And a lot of the Italian directors started around the late 60s, early 70s. And when I say most Italian directors, I mean those Italian directors that were putting movies out in the early 70s. But Ricardo Freida started in the early 40s. In fact, he's probably the oldest Italian director that we have talked about on this channel ever. So let's take a little look at what Ricardo Freida has done. Alright, this is his first film. I did not watch this one, to be fair, but I did watch many of them. This is called Don Cesare di Bazan. Looks to be like a romance type film, possibly an adventure film, because he does have a fencing sword in his pocket. I didn't find this one, but it does have Gino Cervi in it, who was a relatively famous Italian actor, although in the 1942, I'm not sure if he was famous, but he does get top billing there. Then if we go forward, speaking of Gino Cervi, there he is right on the cover of this one. This is Ricardo Freida's adaptation of Les Miserables, which I did watch, and although I've never seen another version of Les Miserables, sorry if I lose credit there with some of you, this was excellent. It's pretty much a straight drama with a little bit of a crime aspect. It's about a man who goes to prison for stealing a loaf of bread and then tries to escape and then gets his sentence lengthened for trying to escape. So he's in prison for a while, then he finally gets out. Then people treat him poorly because he's an ex-convict and he has to walk around with like identification saying that he's an ex-convict. But he ends up working his way up in society, encountering many obstacles. The movie is 3 hours long. And it actually was so long that in Italy in 1948, when this came out, they cut it in half and released it 2 weeks apart. They released it 2 weeks, two weeks apart. So it was amazing. I watched the whole 3 hour film as if it were one. And it was really good. It kind of reminded me that I can, really like a drama if it's done well. This was fully in Italian. This is before Italian directors started dubbing everything all the time. This was actually in Italian. You can hear the actors' voices. which I wish all the Italian films were like, but no such luck. So, that was 48. Then, in 1953, Ricardo Freida did Spartacus, which is about the ancient hero Spartacus, who was a slave in the Roman times, in the times of the Roman Empire, and he led a successful slave revolt. So this is all about that. This was pretty good. Black and white peplum, Roman adventure film in black and white, but it was quite good. You could tell here that the budget was high. There's a lot of extras, a lot of horses, a lot of choreographed battles, good sets. Everything about it was pretty good. It was a straight up realistic heroic film, which you may have picked up that I like the more fantasy type stuff, but this was good. After Spartacus, this is a very important film. Now, I haven't seen this one. It's called The Vampires. It's also known as Lust for a Vampire in English. It gets a little bit confusing because I believe this came out in 1957. I think there's another movie in 1957 also called The Vampire, which is different. Sometimes if you go on some streaming sites, you think you're going to get this, but you get that. I think that's an American film. I didn't watch it. I couldn't find this with any kind of English subtitles or English dubbing. It's out there online in the original Italian, but without subtitles. And this is the first talking Italian horror film ever. Now, I think we talked about this because Ricardo Freida didn't complete this. He actually left it to his cinematographer at the time, a young Mario Bava, and this is Mario Bava's directorial debut, 1957. I've been trying to find this for probably 2 years, because it's the oldest Italian horror film that's not a silent film, and it's Mario Bava's first film, and so I've been looking for this for a long time. Still can't find it. Streaming sites say they have it, but they don't. And on YouTube, you can only find it in Italian or in German. And I think the German one has French subtitles, so I'm out of luck no matter what. Anyway, that is a classic. Now, after that, we have this, which we talked about before, Caltiki, the Immortal Monster. Again, Ricardo Freida started it, and Mario Bava completed it. So, I don't know what's up with that. Ricardo Freida clearly wasn't a giant horror fan, even though he's the first horror director technically, but you know that Mario Bava loved horror because he kept doing horror over and over again, different types of horror, different styles, different subgenres, whereas Ricardo Freida actually is pretty much, other than the vampires, is pretty much just doing what's popular. This is 1958, he's doing a giant sci-fi monster movie. That's what was happening in America in 1959. This came out a year after The Blob, and it has a giant black blob in it. So, let's move on. All right, next, Mario Bava did The Giants of Thessaly, or of Thessaglia. This is another Roman adventure film. This is actually about Jason and the Argonauts and trying to find the Golden Fleece. I've seen adaptations of this before. This one was all right. There's a part where a Cyclops gets a spear to his one giant eye and he starts gushing blood everywhere. And so for 1960 or 61, that's pretty interesting. There's also a part where, I don't know if this is in every version of the story, but the fleece, the Golden Fleece, is on top of a giant statue. And Jason had to climb to the top, which looked completely impossible, but somehow he did it. This one was fairly good. It had monsters in it, so I liked it. All right, moving on. Ricardo Freida's third horror film, and the first one he actually completed himself, which might be why it's nowhere near as good as Caltiki, because Mario Bava didn't really get his hands on it. It's called The Horrible Secret of Dr. Hitchcock. It features Barbara Steele. It is basically a Hammer ripoff because that's what was popular at the time. And it's about a man named Dr. Hitchcock who lives in England. They set the whole thing in England, used English actors for the leads, really tried to make it seem like it was a Hammer film. Basically, this guy, Dr. Hitchcock, likes to inject his wife with a drug that makes her seem dead before they make love. And then, one day, he accidentally, I guess, gives her too much because she dies. And then he leaves his Gothic mansion outside of London, or that's where it's supposed to take place anyway. He ends up meeting Barbara Steele. They get married, he brings her back, and then there's like a low level of haunting. Although I'm pretty sure... Oh yeah, so the twist at the end of this one, which I didn't think was very good. I give Kaltiki an 8 out of 10. I give this one a 5 out of 10. The twist was that he was actually trying to use his new wife's blood to like revive his old wife. Although his old wife wasn't even dead. She was just like messed up. I don't know. It wasn't very good. Unfortunately. Alright, moving forward. We have Machiste in Hell. Also known in America as The Witch's Curse. This one had such a great premise, but a poor execution. If you don't know, Machiste is the Italian superhero of the 1960s. Actually, he was an Italian superhero of the 19-teens and 20s in the silent era, and he was brought back in the 60s after all these Hercules films started generating a lot of popularity. So some companies started making Machiste films, and in this film, which makes no sense, this is like the 7th Machiste film, or maybe it's the 9th Machiste film, and they put out like 4 a year or something like that, from like 61, this is like 63. So, in this movie, they tried to combine the peplum popular genre with the giant muscle-bound superhero with Gothic horror, which was also popular at the time, and so this takes place in Scotland, not ancient Rome, not ancient Greece. It takes place in Scotland in the 1600s, right? And actually in the 1500s, a witch is burned and puts a curse on the land. And then 100 years later, her ancestor shows up and stuff starts going wrong. First of all, she put a curse on her own descendant. I think I said ancestor, I meant descendant. She puts a curse on her own descendant. Why would a witch curse her own descendant? So her descendant shows up and like, you know, bad stuff happens. Her descendant tries to kill herself by hanging herself from a tree, and the tree blooms into flower. Like it looked dead and then it blooms into flower, except I don't think you see it bloom into flower because the movie's just like not good enough to actually show it to you. And I just realized here the score for the Iguana with the Tongue of Fire sounds like it's Final Fantasy music. Anyway, Machiste shows up wearing like a little skirt or like a little pair of shorts or whatever. Everyone else is just wearing like 1600s, like fully covered head to toe in Scotland. Why would anyone show up in just a pair of shorts in 1600 Scotland? He shows up, saves the girl from being executed for witchcraft because she survived her own suicide, and then the people are like, oh, there's a curse on the land, there's a curse on her family, we have to kill her so that the curse goes away. And Machiste is like, no, I'll just break the curse. And so they tell him to go to the tree that blooms, and he pushes it over, and the roots like open up a gate to hell, and he goes into hell, and the rest of the movie is him fighting like animals in hell. Like they couldn't even get like demons or monsters. There's like one guy that looks like a caveman, and then he has to fight an eagle who is like eating Prometheus, I think. I'm pretty sure in the Greek myth, Prometheus gets eternally eaten, his liver eaten by an eagle. Like every day a liver grows back and the eagle comes. So they just have Machiste like fight the eagle, and after he kills the eagle, another eagle comes back. And Prometheus is like, don't worry about me, it's just gonna keep coming back. And then Machiste is like, okay. And the way he solves the problem is, he's so manly in hell that the witch, who is also in hell, that put the curse on the land, falls in love with him and like removes the curse because she's in love with Machiste even though he doesn't like her. At the end, he comes back and he's like, all right, I'm going to find my next adventure now. So apparently Machiste is a time-traveling Roman superhero or Italian superhero because every time he's in a movie, it's in a completely different period of time. I made the movie sound way better than it is, but I mean, it's cool except it sucks. Anyway, Machiste also fights some hellish lions. Hellions? Yeah, so that's that movie. Alright, then, The Spectre, or The Ghost, released in America and England as The Ghost. Barbara Steele's back. Once again, her character's name is Mrs. Hitchcock. Again, this is Ricardo Freida's 4th horror film, if you don't count the last one that did have a witch and hell and, like, not really demons. So, The Ghost, it's almost the same exact plot as the previous Hitchcock movie, except this time, instead of the wife dying, the husband dies. So actual Dr. Hitchcock dies because he was quadriplegic. He was trying experiments with his assistant to try and get himself to come back to full mobility. This throat-cutting scene isn't even a throat-cutting scene. It's just Barbara Steele shaving her husband's face because he's a quadriplegic. This movie is so lame. Like, he starts haunting them, and I don't know if I've coined this term in a previous video, but we get totally Scooby-Doo'd in this video. The movie is called The Ghost, and there's no ghost in it. It's just this guy pretending to be a ghost to get revenge on his wife, who was having an affair with his assistant. So at the end, he's like, ha ha ha, I'm not even a ghost. I just knew you were cheating on me. So die. And it's lame. Barbara Steele is like a total horror icon. And I've seen her in other stuff. I've seen her in the Mask of the Devil, which is also known as Black Sunday. I saw that like a long time ago before I knew who she was. But like, first of all, I don't even know why. How can she be considered a horror icon? You can't even tell if she's a good actress because most of her stuff is Italian and she gets dubbed over. So she's like pretty, you know, and she's in a bunch of mediocre horror films. But she's in other stuff that I haven't seen. She's also in Shivers, which I saw years ago, and I don't really remember her being in it. She must have been a little older because that was 1975. This is 1963, I think. Anyway, Barbara Steele, you're pretty. I'm not sure how much of the credit you deserve yet, but I'm going to watch some more of her stuff. Because why not? I'm going to watch it all, you know. Alright, after that, we finally come... So this was like 1963, and then Ricardo Freida doesn't do another horror or fantasy or adventure film all the way until 1971. I think he did some spy stuff and some westerns in the second half of the 60s, which I really don't care about, so I'm not going to bother with it. Anyway, we're 18 minutes in. We're just starting to talk about the movie. I knew this was going to happen. But I didn't have high hopes for this because I didn't like The Ghost and I didn't like Dr. Hitchcock. And I like a lot of horror, but those two were just boring. This, I looked on Letterboxd and it was only rated a 2.8, which is not that high, so I was expecting a really lame giallo. But it was great, and it was insane. And I don't know what Ricardo Freida was doing in the late 60s, because I didn't watch that stuff, but something happened, and he got on the gore train here. There's a lot of, as you know, the 1971 stuff, some of it has a lot of gore and some of it really doesn't. So he has crossed into the dark side here. Unlike that other one, this is not someone shaving this woman's neck. She is getting her throat cut. So, the very, very beginning of this, which, by the way, I give this a 9 out of 10, which is a very rare high rating for me. 9 out of 10. You can watch this. Where did I watch it? Oh, I watched it on a secret free site, which I think is actually legal, but I'm not positive, so I'm not going to say the name of it. But it was in good quality. You could probably find it. It's also available to rent on YouTube for like $3. So anyway, the very beginning, this girl is walking into a house, and this guy with the black glove, acid attack, fries this girl's face. Oh man, like I've been watching so much stuff from the 50s and 60s that I almost forgot what gore was like. And a lot of the 70s stuff didn't have that much either. So, early 70s. So this girl's face melts on camera, like only for like a second or two, but you see it. And then after her face is melted, she gets her throat cut. and just bleeding everywhere. Like right in the beginning, I was like, oh, this is a whole different flavor of what all the rest of this guy's stuff has been like. And then it goes into a whole, let's find the killer type deal like most gialli do. Unfortunately, the main character is an inspector, but actually it's hard to say who the main character is because really the protagonist is played by Luigi Pistilli, who I like automatically because he was in Ecology of Crime, better known as Bay of Blood in America, and that's one of my favorite gialli ever, and he's in this too. Now again, he's dubbed, so I don't really know if I think he's a good actor or not, but I like that he was in Bay of Blood, and I liked his character in Bay of Blood or Ecology of Crime. And so he shows up 20 minutes into the movie, and he's an inspector who had been kicked off the force because he was so rough with one of his suspects that the suspect killed himself. So he's not a real inspector, but he gets called in by the real inspector for assistance with this case. Anyway, the prime suspect at the beginning is Anton Diffring, who is a great actor. Oh man, now I forget where he's from. A country that speaks German, but I'm not sure that he's from Germany. I think he's from Austria. And in this movie, he is supposed to be from Switzerland, where they also speak German. And so, anyway, he's an ambassador from Switzerland to Ireland. Oh yes, did I tell you this takes place in Dublin? And many of the characters have Irish dubbed voices, including Luigi Pistilli, which I think is very funny. Anyway, the ambassador is the prime suspect because the victim was found in his car, and it's found out later that he was having an affair with the victim. So who killed this lady? Probably him. Also, Anton Diffring got to dub his own lines, which is very nice because he has a distinct voice and German language accent, which fits his Swiss character. Anyway, so much crazy stuff happens in this movie. The first half of it, the very beginning is crazy. Then the first half is decent giallo. And then the last half hour is just nuts. Let me tell you, I'm not going to mess this up for you, but there's a bobsledding sequence where something goes horribly wrong. Okay? How often do you see bobsledding in a giallo? Never, until this. There's also crazy deaths. People get thrown from high heights, which I always like. And they do this thing which, honestly, I'll tell you, I can never figure out who the killer is. And in this one, 15 minutes before the end, I was like, oh, I figured it out. And I get slightly disappointed when I figure it out. And then at the end, no, I didn't figure it out. Okay? And so many twists at the end. It was so good. There's a lot of violence, for those of you who like that, which you probably do if you're watching a horror YouTube channel. And there's a lot of craziness, really smart plot, intelligently written. Oh man, I looked up the writer. What did he do? The writer of this mostly did, well not mostly, but the only stuff I had seen that the writer had worked on were a few Hercules films from the 60s, including Hercules in the Haunted World, which is the English title. I forget what it was originally in Italian, but that's the one Hercules film that Mario Bava had directed. So this guy wrote that. It's probably the best Hercules film because it has the most horror elements in it. The whole thing is good. I'm not even going to say any more about the plot. You should go watch it. It's really good. It was very refreshing after watching all of these mediocre films that Freda did. And it was just really good. So that's going to be it for that. 9 out of 10. Go watch this one. Iguana with the Tongue of Fire. I don't know why it only has a 2.8 on Letterboxd. It's really good. All right, enjoy it. And hopefully it won't be 3 weeks till I do the next one of these. Although the next one I think has a lot of background work to do. So we'll see you soon. Take care.